Hi guys, you're welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be showing us how to cut and sew a mermaid skirt with a train at the back using a freehand method, that is without a pattern paper. So the first thing now is to start with the front, and for the front of the skirt you're going to be folding your fabric into two this way. Because it's going to be the front, it has to be on fold. Make sure you know that. And to know the wideness of the fabric you're going to be folding, that depends on how wide you want the hem of the skirt to be, but it has to be almost twice of your widest part of the skirt, that is the hip circumference area. So after this, the next thing you want to do is to take the skirt length, but because this is a dress, I'm going to subtract the half scale from the full length of this dress, and whatever I have left is what is going to be the length of my skirt. Okay, so here you can decide on how wide or how long you want your skirt to be. If you want it to be extravagant, just decide on that on your own. So after this, now we are going to mark the hip line. Then after the hip line, you are going to measure and mark the knee line. Okay, so you can measure the person, or you just use whatever you use from the waistline to the hip line for the knee line as well. That is, if you have 7 inches from the waist to the hip line, you can as well use 7 inches to 8 inches for the knee line as well. But sometimes it varies, it's not always the same. Okay, so you can just go ahead and measure the person from the shoulder down to the knee line, and you have your value just like we have here. Then after the knee line, we have the skirt length. All right, so the next thing you want to do now is to come to this waist circumference. Divide your waist circumference measurement into 4, and you add your dart allowance if you want to add that. All right, but for this one I'm not going to be adding a dart, so I'm just going to divide my my waist circumference into 4. Then I'm going to impute like so. If you want to add a dart, you're going to add 1 inch. Then you're now going to take your seam allowance, but because this is not going to have a dart, I'm just going to take my exact measurement and I'm going to add my seam allowance. Okay, so now on the hip line, you take your hip circumference measurement divided by 4, then you add your seam allowance. Of course, we do not have a dart on the hip line. All right, so the next thing you want to do on the knee line, you subtract 4 inches from whatever you have on your hip line. It can be 5, it can even be 6. This depends on how fitted you want it to be. But for this one, my client does not want it to be too fitted. At least she wants to be able to be free, at least be free enough. So I'm just going to subtract 4 inches from the hip circumference measurement. That is, if you have 40 inches on the hip, you're going to be marking 34 inches on the knee line. Then from the knee line, you just connect to the skirt length. All right, so I'm going to connect from the waist to the hip, and from the hip to the knee line, then from the knee line to the skirt length, just like you see me doing, straight down. Okay, so you can decide to make it as wide as you want, and at the same time you can decide to have a minimal or just a moderate hemline circumference. Okay, so the next thing we want to do now, we're going to be cutting on this line that we draw. Okay, now this will be all for the front. What I'm going to do now, I'm just going to notch the seam allowance, and also I'm going to notch the center of this skirt. Okay, so the next thing we are going to do now is to place the front bodies on another piece of fabric to cut the back pattern. Okay, so this is how the front is going to look. If you want it to be wider, longer, depends on you. Now for the back part of the skirt, you are going to be having a longer length of fabric and a wider length, just like the one I have here. So after that, now you are going to place your front part, you're going to place it on the fabric just like you see me doing. Okay, you're going to have allowance before the center front and also by the side front. Okay, so just like this one, my fabric is not enough, so I had to join to it. So for the back length, you can decide to extend it by 5, 6, 10 or more. This depends on exactly what you want to achieve or what your fabric can give you. All right, so this one I just extended it by 6 inches. Okay, so I joined about 6 inches to the length of this original fabric. So the next thing I'm going to do is to trace out the hip line and the knee line so that it will guide me when I'm, cutting the back. Okay, so you need to have allowance at the center before the center front. This should be at least up to 10 inches, right? Should be up to 10 inches that you are going to have here, or even more. So this is exactly where you are going to have the train. The train is going to be on at the center back. All right, so just like this one now, the length of my dress is 56 inches. Then I make it 60, I think 64 or 65. Okay, so to make a mermaid skirt, normally the front length is going to be different from the back length, so it is between 5 inches to 10 inches, except if you want a more extravagant style. So at the center back here, you're going to measure your zipper allowance. So for this, I'm going to be measuring 2 inches from the waistline to the hip line, and then after the hip line, I'm going to slant it back to the knee line. This is why you need to trace out your line so that you know exactly where to shape or to draw your curves. And from the knee line here, I'm going to connect back to this center back line. The fabric here, just like you see me doing, I'm going to connect with a straight line like so. All right, so if you have more, you're just going to connect to the end of your fabric. Okay, so this is the center back, this is zip allowance area. All right, so and here I'm going to do something that we call hip allocation or butt contouring. So this is just a way of creating a room for your butt. So on your zip allowance is where you are going to do that. On the waistline, if you have 1.5 inches, you will have 2 inches on the hip line. Okay, and on the hem of the skirt, I'm going to connect from this side back to this full length. So this now depends on how much more fabric you have. If you have much more fabric, you're just going to connect to exactly where your fabric stops. Okay, I hope we get my explanation. All right, so after that, now you're just going to trace out the side, or you cut it out like that. Then you're going to cut at this back as well. So this is what I'm going to be doing now. I'm going to be cutting on the lines that I have. All right, so to a mermaid skirt, just require enough fabric. You can either start from the hem of the skirt, or you start from the center back or the side back. This depends on you. It's not a must you start from somewhere. Just make sure you cut out your skirt just like you see me cutting. Okay, so after cutting this now, on the zip allowance, you're going to cut according to the lines you have there as well. So the next thing I'm going to do after this now is to cut out my lining. So if you want to have a full lining, you cut your lining exactly the way you have your fabric. And if you don't want your lining to get to the hem of the skirt, you simply cut the lining to get to where exactly you want it to get to. So guys, here is my lining, and it's going to stop about 1 inch below the knee line. So you can decide on what you wanted to do depending on your resources and then what exactly your client wanted. So this is what she wanted. It's just going to stop below the knee line. Okay, so after this now, cut out the lining, and I'm going to use it to turn both the front and the back. So I'm going to be turning the back separately because of course we have to remember we have zipper allowance. So I'm going to notch the point where my where I have my hip line. Is going to guide me when I'm about to fix my zip. Then as for the front, I'm going to turn it because it's going to be one. Then I'm just going to turn it like that. So after turning the two, I'm going to show us how exactly it should look like, or it's going to look like. Now I already turned the back, and I have to, of course, because the back is going to be separate. So the next thing you're going to do, as you can see this center back, if you look at it very well, you see that I have a shape at the back like this. So this is the hip contouring or the butt contouring that I did. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to mark out the zipper allowance. Remember that we already stitched part of the allowance we had it, so definitely it's going to be reducing our measurement. So here now I'm going to measure 1 inch for the zipper allowance from the waistline to the hip line, and exactly where I want my zip to stop. So if you look at the shape that I have here, you see that it has a little bit of curve. This is because of the effect of the butt that we wanted. All right, so from your waist down to about 7 or 8 inches, that is where your zip to stop. You don't want it to be too long, and at the same time you don't want it to be too short. It should be somewhere around your hip line, or at least highest rather 1 inch below your hip line. So I'm going to join this. I'm going to use a temporary stitch to hold it from the waistline to the hip line and down to the skirt length. So after this, I'm going to place the front pattern on it, and I'm going to take my seam allowance on both sides. Then I'm going to show us how exactly it will look like. Now what I'm going to do now to make it easier, I'm just going to mark out my seam allowance on both sides, so that by the time I want to place it on each other, it will be easier. Okay, so on the knee line here, you're going to go in by 1.5 inches on both sides of your skirt, or as much as you want to take in, just to give you that shape, that mermaid shape on your skirt. Okay, so I'm just going to take this to the sewing machine now, join it together and bring it back for us to see how it's going to look like. So guys, I already joined the zipper allowance area, and if you look closely, you see that this area pops out a little bit. Okay, this is because of the butt contouring. I just keep saying this so that you guys will understand and get what I'm trying to say. As you can see, it has a slopey effect kind of, so there's no how you want to wear this, especially for those that have a big backside. This is really important. So okay, so you're just going to give them the room at the back for their butts to sit in. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to secure the hem of this skirt. If you want to use a crinoline, you can fix a crinoline at the hem of the skirt, and you can also turn it with your added seam allowance. You must have added the seam allowance. Okay, so and as for the side, you're going to open press your skirt so that the hip area, and as you can see, do you see the back? I really like this effect, so please, you can just cultivate this habit on your skirt as well. It's really important. Okay, to just give you that, you know, that effect even before the person puts it on. And as for the hem of the skirt, this depends on how much more fabric you have, just like I've said before, and this is what my fabric can give me. All right, but at least it's still even like it's more than I expected. Okay, so guys, that'll be all for this tutorial. I'm just going to try this on, although it's not my measurement, so in case it looks somehow, just accept it like that. I just want you to see the back side and the effects. Okay, so guys, this is what the back is going to look like. As you can see, the train is not that much, but at least it is very obvious that we have a train. Okay, so and as for the front, you decide on the length. All right, and because the knee, she does not want it to be too tight, that's why it's not really going in. So that'll be all for this tutorial. Thank you very much for always supporting this channel. Please do not forget to subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and click on the subscribe button. Share this video and drop your comments, and do not forget to take care of yourself. Till next time we meet in my tutorial. Bye bye.